I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know.
He knows he's not a young man. He doesn't walk as well as he used to. He doesn't talk as well as he used to. He doesn't think as well as he used to. And the truth is, he never walked, talked, or thought very well in the first place. Just to give you some sense of where things are, Joe Biden is toast, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to be the one to break it to Joe Biden and the Biden family. They've got Hunter Biden in there giving advice. Sure. Well, he's a crack team member. He's a crack member of the team. That is a play on words. And Dr. Jill Biden really likes being the First Lady of the United States. She has dug her fingernails into the leather desktop in the Oval Office, and we'll going to have to drag her out, clutching her ankles, and she's going to be pulling the resolute desk behind her. I'm not leaving, to quote Dr. Jill Biden. And they got Hunter in there, and he's sitting in on all the meetings, and he's giving crack advice, and everybody admires him very much, and he brings the drugs and the chicks. It's an interesting arrangement they've come to down at the White House. And now, honestly, I think today is officially the day. And I posted a video just yesterday on our various social media that I made here in the radio studio after the big radio show yesterday, saying that, Joe Biden is gone. He's toast. It's over for him. And since I made that video at just about noon yesterday, Eastern time, boy, a lot has happened. Now, the Reuters news agency is reporting that there are 25 Democrats in the House of Representatives, not just living in cardboard boxes in Lower Manhattan or anything, but in the House of Representatives, there are 25 Democrats. And the 25 Democrats have said, they're leaking now, that they are going to call on Joe Biden to leave. Joe Biden is having a meeting, partially in person and partially by Al Gore's amazing internet, Zoom calls and so on, with Democrat governors from around the country that are unhappy with the Biden White House and with Joe Biden's performance. That's the word that's always used, performance, right? At the debate last week. And remarkable as it may seem, a lot of these Democrats are upset. They're miffed that Joe Biden didn't call them afterward to say, hey, no, really, I'm okay. I'm all right. Also, speaking of which, yesterday at the White House press briefing, it was a cringe. Jean-Pierre was asked by someone, apparently a reporter, whether Joe Biden had a brain scan after the debate. And I thought, well, that's a very peculiar question. Isn't that an odd question? You wouldn't ask that out of the blue. You wouldn't ask that unless you knew something or were told something, whether you believed it or not. That Joe Biden may have had some kind of a brain scan, an MRI or a CAT scan, a CT scan, or whatever it may be, to see whether he had had a stroke or whether his brain was okay. But the reporter asked, did Joe Biden have a brain, whatever word she used, scan or a scan after the debate? And Cringe, in a very creepy way, didn't answer the question. She tap danced all over the place and avoided answering the question. And then the reporter asked the question didn't bother to follow up with hey, you didn't answer the question. Did the president have a brain scan? Because reporters aren't very good at being reporters for the most part anymore. There are a few, but very few. And some interesting moments at the White House briefing with Cringe yesterday. My friend James Rosen in the mix at the White House briefing yesterday as well. But some interesting moments there. The brain scan was not the only interesting moment, but it was certainly one of the interesting moments at the White House briefing yesterday with Cringe. And it was Cringe's first briefing since the debate. And she didn't answer a lot of questions because that's what they do. And then, of course, when she doesn't answer the question about the brain scan, every reporter in the room should have been shouting at the top of their lungs, demanding that she answer the question that she didn't answer, but none of them did. And it was, our news media is the most corrupt institution in America, and they're the most inept. Well, it's not really ineptitude as much as it is corruption. And it's all their fault. All of this, Joe Biden, the Democrat Party is in deep because the Democrat Party media has failed to do what they're supposed to do, and that is hold the powerful accountable. And they are the cover-up. I mean, look, the Biden White House has been involved, in the Democrat Party more broadly, has been involved in a cover-up for years as to Joe Biden's mental acuity. That's the word of the week, acuity. But the news media is more guilty than the White House. The White House has a motive. The Democrat Party is corrupt and they lie, and politicians lie all over the place, and both parties or all parties. But the news media, it's supposed to be their job to wear the black and white striped jersey and to throw the flag when appropriate. But instead, they've been using the flag to give Joe Biden a good knob polish the last 3 years. 3.5 years. They just, the flag is being used to buff him, to buff his forehead, and just amazing stuff. And now that he's orange, now that Joe Biden turned orange, which is a little peculiar, I think that the Democrat Party has decided they're going to have to run him over. They're going to have to throw him out, and then they've got their next. And I believe that to be the case now. Wait till you hear the news stories I have to share with you. They are many and quite extraordinary about the Democrat Party turning. The worm has turned. And the worm in this case is the Democrat Party. You know, it's not just Adam Schiff anymore, who was always the inchworm, as his wife calls him. But Adam Schiffless is not the only worm. The entire Democrat Party is the worm. And I've got to... There's a lot to talk about, so I'm going to smother that today with lots and lots of news stories that have to do with the Democrats turning at long last on Joe Biden. We've got an update on President Trump's trial and sentencing in New York, having to do with the so-called hush money. It's a non-disclosure agreement. Every network has had women sign non-disclosure agreements, and probably some men too. Duck, duck, goose. So we got that going. And the Supreme Court, the Democrats are going to attack the Supreme Court. The left-wingers at Axios, who are in bed with the Democrat Party, they have the headline, House Democrats vow aggressive response to Trump immunity ruling. That's the Supreme Court. An aggressive response, the Democrats, to the Supreme Court. They're going to fire on Fort Sumter, maybe fire on the Supreme Court. Maybe they'll have Chuck Schumer go over there and scream and threaten the justices, or maybe they have another one of their boys, their would-be assassins, come out of the woodwork, because it's never been more dangerous to be a Supreme Court justice, unless you're a leftist, of course, because, once again, you get the polished job instead of, honestly. So we've got a now former Democrat member of the House of Representatives, Tim Ryan from Ohio, saying Kamala Harris should replace Biden as the Democratic nominee. And now it becomes a game of, and I really believe this to be the case, I don't think I'm getting ahead of myself. I have been ahead of myself for the last year and a half or 2 years, saying that Joe Biden would not be the nominee come Election Day. I believe long before anybody else was saying that out loud. But Tim Ryan, former Democrat, now so they got former Democrat members of Congress coming out of the woodwork to say that Joe must go and Kamala should replace him because it would be racist not to choose her because, they've painted themselves into a couple of different corners here. First, the Democrats chose Joe Biden, which was a tragic mistake to be their candidate. And then they corruptly won the election for a whole range of reasons, from the information operation run against the American people by the so-called intelligence community and communist voter John Brennan, and that whole cabal that he runs with in the intelligence community. And then somehow they won. It was amazing. Change a few voting laws in Pennsylvania here, there, on a county level in violation of the state constitution. And I could go on and on. And then they chose Kamala Harris because she's a WOC, a woman of color. And they won. And now they've painted themselves into a corner that I think they can now see, because Joe Biden must go. His brain, she's a broke. I've been telling you for a long time now. And his brain, she's so broke that he got to go now. And then they've got Kamala standing there. And Kamala and the gang are already playing the race card because the Democrats are nothing if not racists and race card players. Honestly, they throw them around like they're playing 52-card pickup. Remember 52-card pickup? When, your little brother will say, I want to play cards, and then you just throw the whole deck of cards in the air. 52 cards in the air. And it's a game called 52-card pickup. And that's, they've played the race card so many times that it's now a game of 52-card pickup. But the Telegraph out of the United Kingdom, and not the Washington Post, because it is not a newspaper at all. But here's what the Telegraph reports out of the United Kingdom. Kamala Harris's team is concerned that Democrats will install a white candidate ahead of her to replace Joe Biden, arguing that it would be offensive to black voters to overlook her should the president stand aside. He's going to stand aside. And honestly, they're already playing the race card against themselves, against each other, which is pretty funny because they're looking at the landscape and they say they're going to choose Gavin Newsom, who's destroyed California, and he could destroy the rest of the country just as effectively. But they're already at the point, and this just happened since yesterday when I was sitting here. Amazing stuff. We now have, again, the Reuters news agency saying there are 25 Democrats in the House that are prepared to tell Joe Biden to stand down. And I think the clock is ticking out loud right now, like Marissa Tomei's biological clock and My Cousin Vinny, but it is tick, tick, tick. And how much are they going to dig in? I think they're going to dig in again. They retreat, they dig in, they retreat, they dig in. Honestly, it's like Stalingrad. They don't want to leave, but they've got to because the Democrat Party sees the handwriting on the wall, which they don't very often do. And the handwriting on the wall says Joe Biden cannot win on Election Day, and all they care about is power, much more than they care about Joe Biden. And, they would spit on his grave this afternoon if it meant winning the election in November. So we've got amazing stuff going on today. The President of the United States is on the way out. We've never seen anything like it in human history, certainly in American history. Biden faces rising Democratic rage over debate deflection. This is, your left-wing media. Their headlines are everywhere today. The rising tide of anti-Biden, and it's all Democrat because that's all they care about. They don't care what anybody else thinks. It's about them and not the country, them and not their next-door neighbors or their fellow Americans. And also this kind of wacky one in Politico. Politico has an amazing headline, and it is, "We've all enabled the situation." We've all enabled the situation. Democrats turn on Biden inner sanctum post-debate. They have an inner sanctum because, again, it's like a religious cult. So their inner sanctum, and the inner sanctum is they're trying to protect. It's the Praetorian Guard. They've surrounded Joe Biden. But we've all enabled the situation is the headline in quotation marks, and that's true. Also, as I mentioned, the Reuters news agency, 25 House Democrats. Biden faces growing doubts from Democrats about his 2024 re-election, and that is the holy grail. They would kill everyone in their path to get to re-election because they've still got a lot of destroying to do. A lot of South American gangs need to get in here and, grab your daughter. Amazing. And a poll just out, and Reuters has this too. 1 in 3 Democrats think Biden should quit the race. It's a Reuters Ipsos poll. 1 in 3 Democrats, that's not just the Washington people, but think that Biden should quit the race. So you can hear the ticking from here. It's becoming louder and louder. It's becoming a drumbeat. Joe Biden must go. And then, how do you solve a problem like Kamala, already playing the race card against her own party, the Democrats? Amazing stuff. Joe Biden yesterday said Americans that don't dance with him on climate change are, quote, really dumb. Really dumb, he said. It's kind of like a Hillary Clinton moment, the deplorables moment. These people. Yeah, Joe Biden is on the out. See, he may not know it yet, but I do. He's on the way out. Remarkable stuff. update on the Trump hush money thing in New York, and more evidence, if not proof, that it's just a political lynching, thanks to this left-wing prosecutor from the Soviet Union, Andrew Weissman. Go back to the Soviet Union. Oh, wait, you can't. Amazing stories today all over the place. The First Amendment under attack by the New York Times because they don't like free speech. They're lefties. And we are at 888-630-9625.
You're listening to The Chris Plante Show.
Okay, we are back. And I'd like to go to the telephones because I know everybody wants to talk about the demise of Joe Biden's presidency and how it's going to play out and how do you solve the problem like Kamala because they don't want her. She has now suddenly leapt ahead of Joe Biden in the polls for whatever that's worth. But we'll get into that too. The Democrats are have turned on Joe Biden. It's all about their power. We'll find out soon enough how they sort it out. Right now, let's go to the telephones. Jeff Wolf is in today for Michael Piercy, who's out on family vacation. Let's go to line 4 and to George calling from Chattanooga, Tennessee. George, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, George.
Chris.
How are you?
Happy birthday to America.
Happy birthday, America.
Absolutely. Hey, my concern, or my point that I figured out is Joe's afraid that if Joe Biden loses Donald Trump, that if he's not president anymore, the Republicans run the House, the investigation into his corruption, his taking of bribes, money from foreign governments is going to continue, and Merrick Garland won't be able to block it, and then he will be convicted, and she will be complicit to it, and she could even have some jail time for all the scandal that's going on there. That's why she's pushing the elder Joe Biden.
I like the way you think. That's a lot of fun. Jill could be in prison. I hadn't even thought about that yet, but with Joe Biden and Jill Biden,
She's afraid.
Well, that might explain a lot, like that dress she was wearing the other day with the big word vote all over it. Explain that. That's pretty hard. Might be fear of prison. That's kind of fun, George, I've got to say. And I hadn't considered that myself. But, Hunter Biden and his buddy Devin Archer and James Biden, the brother of Joe Biden, they're all involved in the family business, which is collecting money off of the family name. That's the family business. They don't make suits and ties. They don't build skyscrapers. They don't do anything. They're not in the energy business. They're in the selling access, selling Joe Biden's name business. And they should get into trouble for it, but we live in very corrupt times.
This is the Chris Plante Show.
Politics. What a business. And the Democrat Party, they're coming for your children. If they win in November, it means the end of all life on Earth. It's not just the end of democracy. I've been saying for some time now, the Democrats, they had to destroy democracy in order to save it. They keep talking about how democracy is on the line. In fact, there's a Democrat member of Congress from Maine that came out yesterday and said, the Democrats need to dial down the rhetoric about the end of democracy. And this Democrat, member of the House of Representatives from Maine in a somewhat conservative Democratic district, if that's even a possibility anymore, he should be kicked out of office anyway just because he's a Democrat. And I'll get to him too. He saying yesterday that he thinks maybe the Democrats, with all their end of democracy stuff, may be a little over the top. But I do believe that the Republicans should dial the idiot rhetoric that the Democrats have inflicted upon all of us with their corrupt media allies, should dial it up to 11. Why stay at 10 when you can go to 11? And the Republicans should come out and hold a press conference or put out a release saying that if Joe Biden wins, it means the end of life on Earth. Not just human life, but all animal life, sea life, everything beneath the seas dies if Joe Biden wins. And all plant life dies too. We become a burned out cinder of a planet because the Democrats have won. And I think that should be the rhetoric, just so the Republicans can match the Democrat Party rhetoric and maybe outdo it by a little bit. And then after they do that for a couple of days, they can come out and they can say to the idiot news media, the filthy, corrupt news media, in an infectious hot tub with one another, and say, obviously, that's ridiculous rhetoric, Jake Tapper, that we're using. We know it's ridiculous rhetoric, but you clowns should be pointing out that the Democrat Party's rhetoric about the end of democracy is ridiculous as well. Now, it was an old friend of mine. I paraphrased they had to destroy democracy in order to save it, is a paraphrase from a news report out of Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And a news reporter for the Associated Press, a guy named Peter Arnett, who was an old friend of mine, actually. Peter and I worked with him at CNN. And Peter Arnett was a reporter in Vietnam. He's from New Zealand. And he was reporting from the Vietnam War, and he reported that an anonymous U.S. military officer talking about a combat action in a Vietnamese village said we had to destroy the village in order to save it, or words very close to that. And that was a very hotly debated, for a lot of reasons, line in an Associated Press story written by Peter Arnett. And now the Democrats say, oh, we've got to save democracy. And Joe Biden is the death of democracy. Today's so-called Democrat Party is the death of democracy because they're undemocratic, they're anti-democratic, they're anti-American, they're un-American. They're a disgrace to Western civilization. I think that's plain for everyone to see. Just amazing stuff. Now, Joe Biden, they keep coming up with new excuses as to why, and I'll get to some cringe, as to why Joe Biden did poorly in the debate. They said he had a cold. Then the next day, bam, he snapped back from that cold, and he sounded like he was on cocaine, like he'd been hanging out all night with Hunter or something, and hookers. It was kind of an amazing thing. What a bounce back from his terrible cold that left him incapable of completing sentences cogently, which, for the first time in history, a cold caused a grown man to be incapable of completing thoughts and sentences. But never mind that. The media was good with that. They were good with that. Then they came back and they said, no cold. It wasn't a cold. Now they're back to saying cold again, that he had a cold. And now they've got a new excuse, too. And that is that he was traveling a lot. They say that he was traveling a lot because you may remember he went to the G7 summit in Italy where he wandered out of frame to go over and talk to nobody. And they made up lies about that because they're perfectly happy to lie about everything. Then he came home. And then they went back to, where did he go? He went, was it Italy? He went back to Europe and for another, he went to Normandy in France, for the anniversary. And then he came back and then he went to the G7 in Italy. Then he came back from Italy and he went to California for a big money fundraiser with pimps and hoes in Los Angeles, California, billionaires and, measly millionaires. And they gave him lots of money because they want to buy his influence, and it works. So, when you're investing in Joe Biden, just look at what he's done for Ukraine. They only gave the Biden family several $1 million, and they've gotten tens of billions in Ukraine. I told you the story yesterday. It looks like, our loving president there, Volodymyr Zelensky, he's got a wife who allegedly bought a $5 million car. And that's okay. The news media doesn't report on it. News media doesn't report on news. They just do the Democrat Party's work for them. But there are lots of moving parts, and none of them are moving in Joe Biden's favor. But they said, oh yeah, he was traveling too much. This is their new excuse. He was traveling too much because he went to France and then he came back home for the anniversary of D-Day, of Normandy invasion, 1944. Was Joe Biden there at the Normandy invasion? No, he wasn't. He was a small child at the time. Don't be silly. And then he came back. Then he went to Italy for the G7 where he wandered off. Then he came back and he went to California for a big fundraiser. And then he came back And 11 days later, they had the debate. Spent 6 days at Camp David, where we learned he had to take long naps every day. They couldn't start until 10 or 11 a.m. with their prep, the team prep for the big debate. And then they said he was over-prepared. Remember, they said he was over-prepared because that's a big problem for Joe Biden, being over-prepared. Right? Just amazing stuff. They make up one new lie after another. And the news media, they just carry the lie, no matter what, because that's what they do. They're big liars for the Democrat Party. Now, with all this stuff going on, the New York Times has jumped in, and there's an old thing back again during the Vietnam War. Walter Cronkite was the lead anchor of the CBS Evening News, and he really mattered back then. He was kind of a big deal around here, and Walter Cronkite turned on Lyndon Baines Johnson and said that the Vietnam War was unwinnable or something like that. And he was the most trusted man in America, not LBJ, but Walter Cronkite. And LBJ famously said, allegedly, when I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost America, right? That's how important Walter Cronkite was at the time. And now it's the New York Times for Joe Biden. And the New York Times with the headline, Biden's lapses are said to be increasingly common and worrisome. See, and Joe Biden's got to be looking at this because he gets his news from MSDNC, and I know they were covering this morning because I was watching it, all right? And the New York Times types on behalf of their party, the Democrat Party, corrupt rag that it is, Mr. Biden was drained enough from the back-to-back trips to Europe that his team cut his planned debate preparation by 2 days so he could rest at his house. They leave out that he was back and in the White House 11 days before the debate. They leave that out because they're filthy, corrupt Democrats, and they're not journalists at all. The New York Times continues, several current and former officials and others who encountered him behind closed doors noticed that he increasingly appeared confused or listless. I noticed this long ago. Where have you guys been? Or would lose the thread of conversation. No kidding. You guys picked up on that too, huh? I picked up on that a long time, years ago, literally years ago. The New York Times says, like many people his age, now it's just he's like anybody his age, Mr. Biden, 81, has long experienced instances in which he mangled a sentence, forgot a name, or mixed up a few facts, just a few facts, like, which country are we bombing today again? Which one? I sent $10 billion. I'm sorry, what? I sent that to the Ayatollahs? I can't. Why did I do that? Even though he could be sharp and engaged most of the time, the New York Times says. When they say most of the time, they mean like when he's sleeping or something. But in interviews, people in the room with him more recently said that the lapses seem to be growing more frequent, more pronounced, and more worrisome. I'm glad you guys are onto that. That's the New York Times. They finally caught up to me. They should listen to my show. They'd be years ahead of where they are today. Isn't that amazing? Your Democrat Party, in this case, represented by the New York Times. Just amazing stuff. Now, I mentioned this Democrat member of the House of Representatives, a congressman by the name of Jared Golden. Nobody's ever heard of him. He's a Democrat from the state of Maine, a beautiful and wonderful state, the state of Maine. And he spoke to the Bangor Daily News, and he said, Biden's poor performance in the debate was not a surprise. While I don't plan to vote for him, Donald Trump is going to win. And I'm okay with that, said Democrat Congressman Jared Golden of Maine, because he said, there are winners and losers in every election. I noticed that, too. Have you noticed that, Jeff? I've noticed that in every election there are winners and there are losers, and that the Democrats should probably come to terms with that because they've got a full-blown loser here. Boy, do they have a giant loser. Their guy is the biggest loser that anybody's ever seen living in the White House because his brain, she's a broke. His brain is a no good. It's a no good at all. Just amazing stuff. So he said, Jared Golden, he said, in 2025, I believe Trump is going to be in the White House. Maine's representatives will need to work with him when it benefits Mainers, hold him accountable when it does not, and work independently across the aisle no matter what. Now, this is a guy who is resigned to, and he says, and listen to this, this is my favorite part. He says, I urge everyone, voters, elected officials, the media, and all citizens to ignore the chattering class scare tactics and political pipe dreams. We don't need party insiders in smoke-filled back rooms to save us. We can defend our democracy without them. They're always defending democracy. So noble of them, isn't it? Unlike Biden and many others, I refuse to participate in a campaign to scare voters with the idea that Trump will end our democratic system. That's the end of democracy if Trump wins. That's why I believe the Republicans should say that it's the end of life on Earth if the Democrats win. Human life, mammal life, sea life, all the fishes in the sea die. They'll be dead. All plant life will die if the Democrats win. And then when they're mocked for the rhetoric, the Republicans should just laugh and walk away. Also, the Reuters news agency reporting today, Biden faces growing doubts from Democrats about his 2024 reelection. And the little team of lefties from Reuters say there are 25 Democratic members of the House of Representatives preparing to call for Biden to step aside if he seems shaky in coming days, according to House Democrat aide. One House Democrat aide. Isn't that amazing? So they've got 25, but they're waiting to see. They want to be sure. They don't want to jump the gun. Because Paul Begala, Democrat political advisor, famously said less than a week ago, the first Democrat in Congress to come forward and say Joe Biden should step aside will lose his career and be shot. You will be shot. That's Paul Begala. It'd be funnier if the left hadn't shot and killed 100 million people in the last century. Let's grab a phone call, Jeff. Let's go to line 9 and talk to Russ, calling from Alexandria, Virginia. Russell, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Good morning, Chris.
Hey.
You need to understand that the Democrats' new euphemism for cold is brain freeze.
Yeah, he had a cold. So when they say he had a cold, he didn't, because nobody's ever responded like that to a cold, right?
No. Cold is the new brain freeze, and so it's when you tell him that he's got a cold, that is the full-on brain freeze, and we can expect to see a lot more of that. And it's going to be a fun year.
It's going to be. Well, I got to tell you, the Democrat Party is a train wreck. I think it's official, and we've been talking about this, right, Russ, leading up to this day. I don't think Joe Biden's going to step aside today or anything, and they're going to debate whether he should stay through the end of the term and let Kamala ascend because she's already playing the race card against Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. You can't put a white man in to step in front of me in line. I'm in line. I'm your backup quarterback. I'm a woman of color. And she is an idiot, a cackling fool. Everybody knows it. She has now, Russ, jumped ahead of Joe Biden by a couple of points in the polls. But the Democrat Party is in a flop sweat panic. It's worse than their gender panic.
Well, it's going to be fun because, now that they've made Biden the nominee, removing him is, going to be, the real threat to democracy. People voted for him. And knowing all of this up front, and so we're off and running.
Well, they say the Republican Party is a threat to democracy and Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. The reality is democracy is a threat to the Democratic Party. That's one of the realities going on here. And they've got to figure out how to get rid of Joe Biden and massage, that's the gentlest word I can think of, the Kamala situation, because she becomes their biggest problem the moment Joe Biden falls into an elevator shaft.
There's only one Chris Plant. The Chris Plant Show.
I don't want to break my arm patting myself on the back or throng my own rind in public or anything, but this day, Joe Biden's demise has been coming for a long, long time. And I've got to say, I don't spend a lot of time doing this, but boy, was I right about this a long, long time ago. And I could see it coming. That light, the end of the tunnel, was a train coming at Joe Biden. And there is no Dudley Do-Right to come and save him because he is toast. And I'll just say it like that because today I can say with great confidence that Joe Biden is toast and he's got to go and the party is turning on him. The left-wingers at the Washington Post, a gang of bootlicks for the Democrat Party. Front page below the fold story today. Biden aims to reassure party, public as debate angst grows. They're still calling it debate angst. It's not debate angst. I mean, you guys really didn't know this was going on. What's the matter with you people? Where have you been? Are your brains that limited? Their other headline, Obama shares concerns after shaky debate, offers Biden his advice. Yeah, he's lying to him now, but the advice eventually will be get out. The Washington Post front page piece, a growing number of Democrats on Tuesday began publicly questioning President Biden's performance in last week's debate, calling on him to withdraw from the race and contemplating possible successors. They got that Kamala problem as the fallout spread from what increasingly appears to be a pivotal moment in the 2024 campaign. You guys are really slow, aren't you? I mean, are you that slow or are you that dishonest? Those are the only two possibilities. Tyler Pager and Matt Visor at the Washington Post. Representative Lloyd Doggett of Texas, a Democrat, became the first sitting Democratic member of Congress to ask Biden to step aside, warning of the potential consequences if the president pushes ahead with his re-election effort. He must not deliver us to Trump in 2024, Democrat Lloyd Doggett said. Now, Paul Begala said the first one to come forward would be shot. Paul Begala, longtime Democrat political guy, said the first one to come forward. I guess Doggett is the one to be shot then.